Hello and welcome to another Bob Ross pixel art drawing. Today we are doing Season 24, Episode 8, Cypress Swamp, and our reference image is mgeese84's take on Bob's painting. I hope you like it! For this pixel art drawing, I decided I would go for a swamp at sunset feel, so I chose some orange colors that dissolve into a darker blue-green sky. We also set the sun right there on the horizon. I try to layer the colors on the sun to give it a glowing feel and also to ensure that it's the brightest thing in the area. The next element is going to be a large column of clouds with some deep orange hues. Our view of the clouds put them mostly in shadow from the sun, so I used some darker values to indicate the shadows. However, we will still see some edge lighting on the outlines of the clouds since the sun is so far away. Once the edge lighting is done, I start working on mixing the colors of the clouds together to try and indicate some puffy shapes. When I'm working zoomed in like this, it's always important to keep an eye on the preview window in the lower right to ensure that I'm not getting mired in details at the expense of the composition as a whole. To blend some of the cloud layers together, I use a brush to create a 2x2 dithering pattern between the cloud colors. Next up is the background tree line. I lost my way a bit here and started with a silhouette using one of my brighter colors. This ended up causing me to flail around on this element for a while before getting it to look like I wanted. I should have created the initial outline of the element using one of the mid-tone colors that I picked for these trees. That way I can easily add both highlight and shadows. A lesson to remember for next time. This is where I figured out my mistake and filled most of the layer with a neutral green. I'm trying to resist the temptation to add too much detail to these background trees since they are so far away and I don't want them to be the focus of the drawing anyway. The cypress trees featured in this drawing are really cool. Some of them grow right up out of the water. They also tend to break easily, leaving ragged stumps jutting out of the swamp. The first cypress element is a little broken stump on a tiny island in the middle of the swamp. Getting the edge lighting on this smaller element was tough. A single pixel line is actually quite a lot of real estate on this little guy, and really it's too much for a bright outline color. For the grasses, I try to just make jagged vertical strokes, picking values that are appropriate for the amount of shadow the area should see. It's time to start on the large cypress trees on the right side of the canvas. I'd argue that these trees are the focal point of the drawing. Either way, they're nice to look at. I start by just blocking in the shapes of the trees. I always have fun drawing branches coming off the really weathered trees. I try to make them really janky, and they usually turn out interesting. For the foliage on the trees, I follow a process similar to creating the clouds. I try to ensure that the bright light is showing on the edge of the tree because the sun is directly hitting the side that we can't see. From there, I try to build some deep shadows using the darker shades of green. Don't forget about the little pads of foliage. I use the 3-pixel brush and some shaky hand movements to create the tree leaf texture. Trying to draw each leaf is tedious and, in the end, not great looking, so it's best to just try to give the impression of leaves. Shading the tree trunks and branches themselves is something I've done quite a few times, and I'm usually happy with the way they turn out. The challenge with this drawing is that the lighting situation would really have these trees appearing much darker than I'm used to drawing. I think I came close in the end, but it was really a learning moment. I really love the way the dark branches and foliage contrast with the bright orange sky. I think here is where I figured out that the trees should be darker. Better late than never. For this process, I'm selecting the tree trunks and moving my hand shakily to make some random texture for the bark. The moss hanging from the tree branches is one of the cooler aspects of these cypress trees. It's time for more shaky hand drawing to put the grass texture in for this small swamp island. I try to block in patches of grass that transition from different values of green as we go. I don't like to mix the colors too fully or the grass can end up looking noisy. Putting some clumps of grass out in the water helps sell the shallowness of the swamp. This tree on the left was a compositional addition I made to the original painting. I felt like adding a nice big foreground tree would really add to the depth of the drawing. It also gives me another chance to draw janky branches and more moss. In hindsight, I wish I would have made a different choice for the clouds in this scene. Small wispy clouds would have allowed for this foreground tree to better stand out from the background. Also, the clouds end up causing an issue with my water reflections that we'll get into in a minute. I think Swamp Thing would be happy with this tree moss. It's time to start working on the swamp reflections. I really love the high opacity reflections that a low sun provides on the water. I try to gently build on the reflection using less brightness the further away we move from our line of sight with the sun. To finish off the reflection, I end up doing the old copy, flip, paste onto a lower opacity layer. This was the first time I wasn't really blown away by this effect. I think the low light situation makes it less believable, and I probably should have left it out. I'm trying to find a way to make the cloud reflections look good by messing around with their saturation, but I never did get them to a point I liked and ended up removing them. We're almost done here. I hope you enjoyed this Cypress swamp at sunset.